Good morning, I'm Bob Jamieson from NBC News and the Wall Street Journal. It's before hours, a daily business report. And on this Wednesday morning, the stock market on a roller coaster, where it's been and where it might be going. News of takeovers and oil prices in the wake of new tensions in the Persian Gulf. And Chairman Dan Rostenkowski tells us about a budget compromise and the prospect for new taxes. The stock market's wild ride to its biggest single-day point gain is raising as many questions this morning about what happens next as it answers. The market snapped a 5-day losing streak that had seen it drop more than 120 points on the Dow Jones Industrial Average. But the gain, 3%, was not the largest percentage point gain in history. Up only a modest 17 points 2 hours before the closing bell, it then took off with a vengeance. The Dow finished up 75.23, in all a 91-point turnaround to close at 2568.05 in heavy trading. The broader market also advanced smartly. Standard & Poor's 500 stock index was up almost 9 points to close at 319.50. The bond market was also stronger. The Shearson-Lehman long-term Treasury bond index was up almost 8 points to close at 1192.95. With today's outlook and some answers about Tuesday's bullish market, here's the Journal's Pamela Sebastian. Good morning, Pam.
Good morning.
Pam, all of this raises the question, has the dread correction come and gone?
Well, it's hard to argue with the 75-point jump in the Dow, even if it was boosted along by a couple of dozen buy programs at the close yesterday. But if the market technicians are right and this latest correction is cured, then they say the Dow stocks may be ready for a last fling in this cycle.
Where does this put us in the big bull market cycle?
Well, one school of thought holds that these blue chips can't keep blasting away forever. At some point, they're replaced by the secondaries. Yesterday, for instance, AT&T was up 1.5. That's a big move for that stock. IBM was up 5. General Electric was up nearly 3, while the index of over-the-counter stocks was up only about 2 compared to the Dow's 75 points.
Pam, what will the market be watching today?
Well, you can bet a lot of traders were babysitting the bond market overnight. Last evening in Chicago, futures prices kept going strong, and in London this morning, bonds themselves were stronger.
All right, Pam, thanks very much. We'll see what happens today. Tuesday's most active stock was Newmont Mining, and a buying wave that set a record for the total dollar value of a single company's shares traded in a day was led by Consolidated Goldfields plc. It boosted its stake in Newmont to nearly half the company's shares, thwarting a takeover bid by a T. Boone Pickens-led investor group. London-based Consolidated bought 14 million of the almost 19 million shares traded at a dollar value of more than 1.78 billion. ICM Pharmaceuticals this morning may be putting Hoffmann La Roche of Switzerland into play as a takeover target. ICN of California disclosed a 6.3% stake in Hoffmann La Roche, and individuals familiar with the company told the Wall Street Journal that ICN hopes to draw the attention of several potential suitors to what it considers a treasure trove of undervalued assets in Roche. In Switzerland, Roche officials and analysts said a takeover would be impossible, insisting family members hold a controlling interest. And in an unprecedented move, the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corp has reinstated LTV's pension plans, forcing the steelmaker to once again take charge of its $2 billion pension fund shortfall. LTV filed for Chapter 11 protection last year, in part to get out from under its pension plans. The federal agency is cash-strapped, but it cited LTV's new contract with the United Steelworkers as the chief reason it's handing back the pension plans. The dollar this morning is mixed in early European trading. The dollar's down against the yen at 144.25. It's up against the mark at 1.8260, and the dollar's up against the pound, which is trading at $1.6365. Gold this morning is down $2 an ounce in London from Tuesday's close in New York, trading at $460.10. Next, capital gains. The powerful chairman of the powerful House Ways and Means Committee on new taxes and a compromise with the White House over a new budget. The Senate this morning is scheduled to take final action on a new debt ceiling and a revitalization of the Graham-Rudman deficit reduction law. The House Tuesday passed the measure worked out in conference with the Senate, setting a $23 billion deficit reduction goal for the new fiscal year. Even though the new Graham-Rudman sets easier targets than the old statute, the administration appears split on its effects on military spending. But while he waits for White House reaction to the new Graham-Rudman, Chairman Dan Rostenkowski of the House Ways and Means Committee is moving on to his next goal, a compromise on the new budget that could include $12 billion in new taxes, half what House Democrats earlier wanted. In an interview with Before Hours, Rostenkowski said the passage of Graham-Rudman may finally break the logjam.
What we've done so far is avoid our responsibility. This conference report will at least send a word out to the country that the legislative branch is ready, willing, and able to accept its responsibility. And that is do something about the deficit.
If you could will a compromise, what shape would it be?
I'd like to see the Republicans supporting a proposition that isn't so ridiculous that members would not even entertain any thought. I think that this $12 billion and $7 billion in reductions in social programs and giving the Defense Department its hit is reasonable. I think that reasonable legislators will accede to endorsing something like this.
Where do you think we will find ourselves next week on taxes?
Writing a tax bill, not so large that it's going to really injure anyone, but reasonable enough so that we can see members of both parties support it, and I hope open the eyes of the president so that he can support it as well.
And where will the money come from?
That is going to be a decision that will be made by members of the Ways and Means Committee. There are some areas that I think are not controversial, but I'm not going to forecast that until such time as I get a document.
In your opinion, is the president the last one who is in the White House opposing some sort of taxes, or as people in Congress would like to say, revenue enhancement?
Well, the president has indicated, certainly in every press conference, that he's not going to tolerate any revenue increases. I don't know how we do anything about trying to reach out for a balanced budget in 1993, or how we do anything about deficit reduction without revenues. There's just no more fat to cut in social programs. And, of course, there's a great argument about whether or not we should cut more in defense. And, of course, that's the president's sacred cow.
Straight ahead, World Watch, the new tensions in the Persian Gulf and the oil business.
Before Hours is sponsored by Sealy Mattress. More people sleep on a Sealy Posturepedic. And by IBM.
Most oil trading on world markets has remained relatively stable during the past 48 hours. This despite the new confrontation between the United States and Iran in the shipping lanes of the Persian Gulf and Tehran's rejection of the UN call for a ceasefire in the 7-year-old Gulf War. And as NBC's Martin Fletcher reports from the Gulf, stability, not necessarily higher prices, is welcome news to the oil-rich nations there.
Nobody's keeping a closer watch on the effects of the tanker war than the merchants of the Gulf. Their time-honored question, is it good or bad for business?
So how is the business? Well, good. It is moving smoothly ahead.
Oil production in the Gulf is up, prices are low, but relatively stable. And that adds up to good news for consumers and producers.
This is very important to us, is that to keep the flow of oil. So not to bother or not to disturb the world economy. That's something that we should look at.
When U.S. warships began escort duty in the Gulf in July, oil prices rose sharply as consumers built up oil reserves. The fear, war with Iran and less oil. But Iranian gunboats have kept away from the Americans, and while tension is still high, prices of North Sea Brent have stabilized around $18 a barrel. Among the big winners, Iran. Since August, Iran has exported about 2.5 million barrels a day, 500,000 more than its OPEC quota. The oil exports fuel Iran's war machine, hence Iraq's attacks on Iran's oil installations and foreign tankers, trying to bankrupt Iran into peace. It hasn't worked. Oil flows freely. Iraq's attacks on oil fields and installations have served only to widen the war. Martin Fletcher, NBC News in the Gulf.
Time now for Joe Whitty. Where are the delays this morning, Joe?
Thanks, Bob. In the northeast, some patchy fog around Portland, Maine, but the rest of the east is in good shape. Chicago, 75, partly sunny. Atlanta, 81 and sunny. Dallas, 86 degrees and sunny skies there. Now, in the west, some morning fog may cause some delays around Los Angeles and some afternoon thunderstorms could possibly cause diversions around the Phoenix area.